The scissors made a soft snipping sound as I trimmed the stems of white peonies, each cut releasing a faint green scent that mixed with the earthier smell of wet soil from the buckets lined along Tatiana's workbench. My fingers had gone numb an hour ago, the cold water seeping through my skin until I couldn't feel the thorns anymore, just the vague pressure of stems between my palms. Outside the shop window, February rain turned the street into a watercolor painting, all grays and browns bleeding together. "Gemma, the pop-off anniversary arrangement needs baby's breath," Tatiana called from the front, her Russian accent making the words sound like a gentle command rather than a request. "The delicate kind, not the cheap filler." I nodded, reaching for the bin of gypsophila we'd received that morning. My back ached from standing, a familiar pain that settled into my spine around hour 6 of any shift. The floristry studio where I'd worked for 3 years wasn't luxurious, but it had a certain charm. Exposed brick walls, vintage glass vases catching afternoon light, the constant perfume of seasonal blooms. Tatiana had taught me to read flowers like emotions, to understand that peonies meant bashfulness, that white roses could express both reverence and silence. I was good at silence. I'd built my life around it. The apartment I'd moved into 2 months ago was a studio on the 4th floor of a building in a neighborhood that developers had forgotten to gentrify. The rent was manageable, the neighbors were quiet, and the hallway had a window at the end that let in enough light to keep a small potted fern alive. I'd placed it there the first week, watering it every other day, pleased when new fronds began to unfurl. On my 3rd day in the building, I'd written a note on cream cardstock, the expensive kind we used for sympathy arrangements at the shop. "Dear neighbor in 4B, I'm Gemma from 4C. If you ever need anything, please let me know." I'd slipped it under his door, heard it whisper against the wood floor inside, then retreated to my own apartment with my heart beating too fast. I never received a response, but I'd started noticing things. The door to 4B opened and closed at irregular hours, sometimes 3 a.m., sometimes noon, never following a pattern I could predict. I caught glimpses of him, tall, dark-haired, always in black clothing that looked expensive even from a distance. His footsteps were quiet for a man his size, a deliberate softness that suggested he'd learned to move without drawing attention. Once I'd been coming up the stairs with an armful of grocery bags when he descended past me. He'd pressed himself against the railing to give me space, and I'd caught the scent of his cologne, something with cedar and smoke, layered over what might have been gunpowder, or just the metallic tang of the city. Our eyes had met for half a second. His were dark, almost black, with a weariness that seemed to pull at something in my chest. I'd murmured, "Excuse me," and he'd nodded. Nothing more. That had been 3 weeks ago. Since then, I'd fallen into small rituals without meaning to. On rainy days, I left my spare umbrella propped against his door. When Larissa from 4A mentioned that someone had been smoking in the stairwell, leaving ash on the steps, I swept it away before he might see it and think less of the building. I watered the fern in the hallway window, and sometimes, when I was feeling particularly foolish, I'd hum while climbing the stairs. Old songs my grandmother had taught me, melodies without words that felt safer than speech. I never saw him react to any of it. But the umbrella was always returned, propped against my door the next morning, folded precisely with the handle facing outward. "Gemma, you're doing that thing again," Tatiana said, appearing beside me with a knowing look. She was a short woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, but her eyes were kind. That thing where you trim the same stem 5 times because your mind is somewhere else. I looked down and realized she was right. The peony in my hand had a stem barely 2 inches long now, too short for any arrangement. "Sorry, I'll use it for a boutonniere. Is not about the flower." Tatiana took the ruined bloom from me and set it aside. "Is about you. You work here 3 years. I watch you become more ghost each month. You eat lunch?" I had coffee. "Coffee is not lunch." She sighed, pulling off her work gloves. "You remind me of my daughter. So much heart. You fold it up small so nobody can see. But heart is like flower. It needs light, or it dies. I opened my mouth to protest, but the bell above the shop door chimed. A man entered, shaking rain from a black overcoat. He was perhaps 40, with sharp features and eyes that scanned the shop like he was cataloging exits. Everything about him felt wrong in a space dedicated to beauty and growth. "We're preparing an order right now," Tatiana said smoothly, moving toward the front counter. "But I can help you in a moment. I'm not here for flowers." The man's accent was similar to Tatiana's, but harder edged. "I'm looking for someone. Woman, blonde, mid-20s. She lives in the building on Cheswick Street. Works with flowers." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I froze, scissors still in hand, trying to make myself smaller behind the work table. "Many people work with flowers," Tatiana said, her voice careful. "Many buildings on many streets. This one's particular. She's been leaving things for a neighbor. Notes, umbrellas." The man smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Thought maybe she works at a flower shop. Thought maybe someone here might know her." My heart hammered against my ribs. The scissors felt slippery in my palm. "I know nobody like this," Tatiana said firmly. "Perhaps you try different shop." The man's gaze drifted past her, landing on me. I forced myself to keep trimming, to maintain the rhythm of work, even though my hands were shaking. After a long moment, he nodded. "Perhaps, but if you remember anything," he placed a card on the counter. "You call this number." He left, the bell chiming cheerfully behind him in grotesque contrast to the tension he'd left behind. Tatiana waited until his shadow disappeared from the window before she turned to me. "You tell me truth now," she said quietly. "This neighbor of yours, who is he?" "I don't know," I whispered, and it was true. I don't know anything about him. I left a note. I was being friendly. Tatiana picked up the card the man had left, studied it, then tore it into pieces without reading whatever was printed there. "Friendly is good. But some people, friendly is dangerous to them. You understand?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand at all. "You go home now," Tatiana said. "Back entrance. Keep your head down. And Gemma?" She caught my arm as I gathered my coat. "Maybe you stop leaving things at this man's door. Some flowers. They have thorns you cannot see until too late." The walk home took 20 minutes, and I spent all of them looking over my shoulder. The rain had intensified, turning gutters into streams that rushed toward storm drains. My coat wasn't waterproof, and by the time I reached my building, I was soaked through, shivering. The stairwell smelled like old cooking and damp concrete. I climbed slowly, my wet shoes squeaking against the steps. When I reached the 4th floor, I stopped. There was light coming from under the door to 4B. He was home. I stood there, dripping onto the worn carpet, trying to decide what to do. The man who'd come to the shop had been looking for me specifically. He'd known about the notes, the umbrella, which meant someone had been watching. Which meant I'd inadvertently drawn attention to my neighbor. This quiet man who clearly valued his privacy. I should apologize. I should explain that I'd meant no harm. That I'd simply been trying to be kind in a way that felt safe. Before I could lose my nerve, I knocked on his door. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet hallway. I waited, counting my own heartbeats. 10, 20, 30. The door opened. He was taller than I'd realized, with dark hair slightly disheveled as though he'd been running his hands through it. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with what looked like old scars. His expression was neutral, carefully blank, but his eyes, those dark, tired eyes, held mine with an intensity that made me forget how to breathe. "I'm sorry," I blurted out. "I'm so sorry." Someone came to the flower shop today asking about me, about us, about the notes I left you. I didn't mean to cause problems. I just wanted to be neighborly. But I understand if that was unwelcome. And I promise I won't bother you again." He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched me with that same unsettling focus. "I know you never responded to my note," I continued, words tumbling out too fast, which I should have taken as an answer. "I should have respected your privacy. It's just, you seemed like you might need a friend, and I know how that feels. Being alone in the city and... Come inside." His voice was deeper than I'd expected, with a gravelly quality that suggested either too many cigarettes or too much shouting. I blinked at him. "What? It's not safe for you to stand in the hallway." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please." Everything in me screamed that this was a terrible idea. But the alternative was going back to my own apartment, being alone with the knowledge that someone was watching, that my simple kindness had somehow created danger. I stepped inside. The apartment was sparse in a way that suggested intentionality rather than poverty. Minimal furniture, a leather couch, a single chair, a table with nothing on it. No photographs, no personal items, nothing that would indicate who lived here or what they cared about. The walls were bare except for one painting, an abstract piece dominated by dark blues and blacks. "You're soaking wet," he observed, closing the door behind me. "I'll get you a towel." He disappeared through a doorway, and I stood awkwardly in the center of his living room, dripping onto hardwood floors that looked newly refinished. When he returned, he handed me a towel that was thick and soft, the kind that suggested someone who understood quality. "Thank you," I murmured, pressing it to my hair. "The man who came to your work," he said, his tone neutral. "Describe him." I did, including every detail I could remember. His age, his accent, the way he'd scanned the room like he was hunting. As I spoke, something changed in my neighbor's expression. Not anger exactly, but a coldness that made the temperature feel like it had dropped. "His name is Nikolai," he said when I finished. "And you were right to be concerned." "Who is he?" "Someone who works for me. Or did." He moved to the window, looking out at the rain. Someone who's recently decided that betrayal might be more profitable than loyalty. The words hung in the air between us. I should have been afraid. I should have put down the towel, walked out of his apartment, and never looked back. But something in his voice, a weariness, a resignation, kept me rooted in place. "What does he want with me?" I asked. He turned from the window, and in the dim light, he looked older than I'd first thought. Not in his face, but in his eyes. "He believes you're important to me, that you could be used as leverage. But I'm not. Important to you, I mean. We're just neighbors." Something flickered across his expression, too quick for me to name. "It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what he believes. And now that he's seen you, that you exist." He trailed off. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have responded to your note. I should have told you to stay away." "Why didn't you?" The question came out softer than I'd intended. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the strangest feeling that he was memorizing my face. "Because," he said finally, "for 5 months, you've been the only good thing in my day." My breath caught. He continued before I could respond. "The umbrella on rainy days, the fern in the hallway that someone tends, the singing on the stairs, old songs, traditional melodies. You thought I didn't notice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stack of cream cardstock. My notes. All of them. I kept every one. I stared at the cards in his hand, my handwriting visible even from a distance. "But you never answered." "I'm not a good man, Gemma Morozov." He said my full name like he'd memorized it, and good men are the only kind you should let into your life. Then why tell me this now? Because Nikolai won't stop looking, and if he finds you, if he confirms that you matter to me. He moved closer, and I caught that scent again. Cedar and smoke and something darker underneath. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I should have said no. I should have run. But I looked into his tired, dark eyes and saw something I recognized. Loneliness wrapped in layers of protection, the same armor I wore every day. I don't even know your name, I whispered. Massimo, he said. Massimo Sokolov. And with those words, everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, after Massimo? I could barely think his name without feeling the strangeness of it, the intimacy of finally knowing, after he'd told me to pack a bag and be ready by dawn. Not much, he'd instructed, walking me back to my apartment with his body angled between me and the stairwell, as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. One bag. Essentials only. We'll send for anything else later. Later. As though there would be a later. As though my life hadn't just fractured into before and after the moment I'd knocked on his door. Now I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the city wake through my single window. The sky was shifting from black to gray, that uncertain pre-dawn color that never lasted long enough. My bag sat beside me, packed with clothes, toiletries, my grandmother's locket, and a pressed flower from the first bouquet I'd ever arranged at Tatiana's shop. A white peony that I'd kept between the pages of a book for 3 years. I'd texted Tatiana an hour ago. Family emergency. We'll be out of town for a while. I'm so sorry. She'd responded immediately despite the hour. Be safe, little one. Job will be here when you return. If I returned. The knock on my door came exactly at sunrise, so quiet I might have missed it if I hadn't been waiting. I opened it to find Massimo in different clothes, dark jeans, a black Henley, leather jacket, but the same tired eyes. He scanned my apartment in a single sweep, taking in my few possessions with what looked like approval. You live simply, he observed. I don't need much. I picked up my bag, but he took it from me before I could protest. Alexei is waiting with the car, he said. We'll go out the back way. Don't speak to anyone. Don't look at anyone. Just stay close to me. I followed him down the service stairs I hadn't known existed, through a door marked maintenance only, and out into an alley where a black sedan idled with its lights off. A man I recognized from the building. I'd seen him twice. Always coming or going from Massimo's apartment, stood beside the rear door. Alexei Dimitrov, Massimo said by way of introduction. He handles security. Alexei was broad-shouldered with light brown hair, and a face that might have been handsome if not for a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He nodded at me with what seemed like genuine courtesy. Miss Morozov, I apologize for the circumstances. Get in, Massimo said, opening the door for me. The interior of the car was leather and silence. I slid across the seat, and Massimo followed, maintaining a careful distance between us. Alexei took the driver's seat, and we pulled out of the alley without headlights, merging into the early morning traffic like smoke disappearing into fog. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere safe. Massimo was looking out the window, his profile sharp against the gray light. Somewhere Nikolai doesn't know about. How many places does he know about? Too many. He turned to look at me then, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. I should explain what this is, what I am. You don't have to. I do. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. 5 months ago, you left a note on my door offering help. You've been kind to me without knowing anything about who I am or what I do. You deserve the truth. I waited, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. My family has been in the protection business for 3 generations, he began, choosing his words carefully. We provide security for people and businesses that can't rely on traditional law enforcement. We resolve disputes that the courts won't touch. We ensure that certain transactions happen smoothly and that certain people remain safe. You're in the mafia. The bluntness of my words seemed to surprise him. A muscle in his jaw tightened. That's one word for it. What's another word for it? Necessary. He held my gaze. In the neighborhoods where I grew up, where my father and grandfather lived, there are people who prey on the vulnerable, who exploit the desperate. We stop them. We protect our own. Sometimes that requires violence. Often it requires the threat of violence. Always it requires power. I thought about the man who'd come to the flower shop, the predatory way he'd scanned the room. And Nikolai? Was my father's lieutenant before he was mine. I trusted him. Massimo's voice went cold. 3 weeks ago, I learned he'd been selling information to a rival organization. Details about our operations, our people, our vulnerabilities. He was preparing to orchestrate a coup, to eliminate me and take control. But you found out first. I found out first. He glanced at Alexei, who met his eyes in the rearview mirror with something like grim understanding. I was planning to handle it quietly, quickly, but then he saw you. How? He's been watching my apartment for weeks, trying to establish patterns. He photographed you entering the building with groceries, leaving for work, watering the fern. Massimo pulled out his phone, swiped through a few images, then handed it to me. I stared at photographs of myself, walking up the stairs, unlocking my door, placing an umbrella against 4B. In some, my face was clearly visible. In others, I was just a blonde woman in a worn coat, carrying flowers or groceries or nothing at all. He thinks you're my mistress, Massimo said quietly. That I've been hiding you in the apartment next to mine. That you're my weakness. I handed the phone back with shaking hands. But I'm not. No. He pocketed the device. You're just someone who was kind. Someone who saw a neighbor and offered help without expecting anything in return. But in my world, kindness is always transactional. Nikolai can't conceive of any other reason why you'd matter to me. And do I? The question escaped before I could stop it. Matter to you? Massimo was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. The car turned onto a highway heading north, away from the city. Dawn was fully arrived now, pale light washing over everything. Yes, he said finally, though I didn't realize how much until I saw those photographs, until I imagined what Nikolai might do to you. My throat felt tight. What happens now? Now we disappear. I have a property upstate that's registered under a different name. We'll stay there until I can neutralize the threat. How do you neutralize someone who wants to kill you? Carefully. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, and with better intelligence than he has. We drove for 2 hours, the city giving way to suburbs and then to genuine countryside. I watched bare trees blur past the window and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of 12 hours. Yesterday I'd been a florist living in a tiny apartment, my greatest concern whether the hellebore shipment would arrive in time for a weekend wedding. Today I was fleeing with a man I barely knew, a man who'd just confirmed he was exactly what I'd half suspected. Someone dangerous, someone powerful, someone who operated in shadows. And yet, I thought about the umbrella always returned precisely folded, about the fern that had flourished in the hallway window, its fronds growing greener and fuller each week, about the way Massimo had stepped aside on the stairs to give me space, had moved with that deliberate quietness that now seemed less like stealth and more like consideration. The songs I sing, I said suddenly. On the stairs. How did you know they were traditional? He glanced at me. My grandmother was Russian. She sang the same ones. Mine too. She raised me after my parents died. Taught me to arrange flowers and speak a little Russian and find beauty in small things. Mine taught me chess and how to read people, and that loyalty was worth more than money. He paused. She would have liked you. The observation felt weighted with something I couldn't quite name. Before I could respond, Alexei spoke from the front seat. Boss, we have a tail. I turned to look out the rear window. 3 cars back, a silver sedan was matching our speed with meticulous precision. How long? Massimo asked, his voice going flat. Since the city limits. I thought I might be paranoid, but they've followed us through 4 lane changes. Massimo pulled out his phone and made a call. Nikolai found us faster than expected. We have a tail heading north on 87. Silver Camry. Plates I'm sending you now. He paused, listening. No. We stick to the plan. But I need you to run those plates and tell me who I'm dealing with. He ended the call and turned to me. Put your seatbelt on. Alexei, lose them. What followed was the most terrifying 10 minutes of my life. Alexei drove like someone who'd been trained for exactly this scenario, aggressive but controlled, weaving through traffic without hesitation. The silver car stayed with us for 5 miles, then suddenly veered onto an exit ramp. They're not trying to catch us, Massimo observed. They're confirming the route. Nikolai knows where we're going. How is that possible? Alexei demanded. Because I've used this property before, for exactly this purpose. Massimo's expression was grim. He's gambling that I'm predictable. Are you? I asked. He looked at me with something that might have been admiration. Usually, but not today. He pulled out his phone again and made another call. Change of plans. We're going to the city property instead. Yes, I know it's exposed. That's the point. Pull everyone back to defensive positions. I want full surveillance on all approaches. Another pause. Because if Nikolai thinks he has me cornered, he'll make his move. And when he does, I'll be ready. The car executed a sharp U-turn at the next exit. Alexei drove us back toward the city, taking a completely different route that wound through smaller towns and back roads. The morning sun was higher now, and I could see the tension in Massimo's shoulders, the way his hand kept moving to his phone as though waiting for it to ring. You're using me as bait, I said quietly. No. He turned to face me fully. I'm using the assumption that you matter to me as bait. There's a difference. Not much of one. Gemma. He said my name like he'd been practicing it. I meant what I told you last night. You've been the only good thing in my days for months. The thought of Nikolai touching you, hurting you. His jaw clenched. I'd burn everything I've built before I let that happen. The intensity in his voice made my breath catch. You don't even know me. I know you sing old songs while climbing stairs. I know you take care of a fern that isn't yours because you believe all living things deserve attention. I know you leave umbrellas for strangers and work with flowers because you see beauty as something worth cultivating. He leaned closer, not touching but near enough that I could smell cedar and smoke. I know enough. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a building in a part of the city I didn't recognize. Alexei parked in a spot marked reserved and cut the engine. The silence was immediate and total. We'll be safe here, Massimo said. At least for now. He led me to an elevator that required a key card to operate, then up to a penthouse that was the complete opposite of his sparse apartment. This space was full of life. Artwork on the walls, books on shelves, a kitchen that looked actually used. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, offering a view that must have cost more than I'd make in a decade. This is where you actually live, I observed. This is where I exist. He set my bag down in the entryway. The apartment on Chiswick Street is where I go when I need to remember who I was before all of this. And who were you? Someone's son, someone's grandson, someone who still believed that good intentions mattered more than good strategy. He moved to the windows, looking out at the city spread beneath us. That person died a long time ago. I walked up beside him, close enough to see our reflections in the glass. Him tall and dark and closed off, me small and blonde and still dripping uncertainty. I don't think he's dead. I think he's just tired. Massimo turned to look at me, and for a moment, the careful mask he wore slipped. I saw grief there, and loneliness, and something else that made my heart beat faster. "You should rest," he said, his voice rough. "There's a guest room down the hall. You'll be safe here. I promise you that." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 3 weeks ago." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to end this." I wanted to ask how. I wanted to ask what ending it meant. But the exhaustion of the past 12 hours was catching up with me, and my legs felt suddenly unsteady. Massimo noticed immediately, his hand moving to my elbow to steady me. "Come on," he said, his touch gentle. "Let me show you the room." He led me down a hallway lined with abstract paintings to a bedroom that was simple but elegant. White linens, soft lighting, a view of the city through gauze curtains. My bag was already there, placed carefully on a bench at the foot of the bed. "There's an ensuite bathroom," Massimo said, pointing to a door. "Everything you should need. If you want anything else, food, clothes, anything, just ask. Thank you." The words felt inadequate for everything he'd done, everything he was doing. He paused in the doorway, looking back at me. "Gemma, I am sorry. For all of this. You didn't ask to be pulled into my world." "No," I agreed. "But I did ask if you needed anything. And you answered." Something in his expression shifted. "I did. Though my answer might have complicated your life more than you bargained for." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to make sense of everything. Outside the window, the city stretched in all directions, millions of people going about their normal Monday morning, unaware that somewhere in this sprawl, a man named Nikolai was planning violence, and a man named Massimo was planning to stop him. And I was caught in the middle, a florist who'd only wanted to be kind to a lonely neighbor. I lay back on the bed, not bothering to change clothes, and closed my eyes. Sleep came quickly, pulling me under into dreams of dark hallways and umbrellas and peonies that smelled like smoke. I woke to the smell of coffee and the low murmur of voices in another room. For a disoriented moment, I didn't know where I was. The bed too soft, the light too bright, the silence too complete. Then memory returned in a rush. Massimo. Nikolai. The car chase. The penthouse. I sat up too quickly, and the room swayed. My phone on the nightstand showed 2:47 p.m. I'd slept for nearly 6 hours. Outside the window, the city blazed with afternoon sunlight, all sharp edges and glass reflections that hurt to look at directly. The voices continued from somewhere down the hall. I stood, smoothed down my wrinkled clothes, and followed the sound to a study where Massimo sat behind a desk with Alexei and another man I didn't recognize. All three looked up when I appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting." Massimo rose, and I noticed he'd changed into fresh clothes. Black slacks, a charcoal shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "We were just finishing. Gemma, this is Pavel. He handles our intelligence operations." Pavel was older than the others, perhaps 50, with silver hair and sharp eyes that assessed me with professional detachment. "Miss Morozov, a pleasure. Likewise." I stayed in the doorway, uncertain of my place in this gathering. "We'll continue this later," Massimo told them. Both men nodded and filed past me, Pavel offering a polite nod as he left. When the door closed behind them, Massimo gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." I did, watching as he poured coffee from a carafe into 2 cups. He added cream and sugar to one without asking my preference, then handed it to me. I took a sip, and found it was exactly how I liked it, sweet and pale. "How did you know?" I asked. "I've watched you make coffee at the building, through the window in the hallway." He settled back into his chair, cradling his own cup. "You always use the same ratio. 2 sugars, enough cream to turn it beige." The thought of him observing these small details about me sent an odd flutter through my chest. "You pay very close attention to things that matter." He set his cup down. "We've had some developments while you were sleeping." Nikolai made contact. My hands tightened around the warm porcelain. "What kind of contact?" "A message, through intermediaries." Massimo pulled up something on his phone and turned it to show me. A photograph of the flower shop where I worked, taken from across the street. No people visible, just the storefront with its cheerful display of seasonal blooms in the window. He's making his position clear. He knows where you work. He knows you matter to me. He's suggesting we negotiate. Negotiate what? His terms for leaving you unharmed in exchange for me, stepping aside from my position in the organization. Massimo's voice was flat, but I caught the current of rage underneath. He thinks he can leverage you into my surrender. But he can't. We're not. I stumbled over the words. "We're not what, Gemma?" He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes holding mine. "Not involved? Not connected? Would you believe that if you were in his position?" I thought about the umbrella, the notes, the fern. "No," I admitted. "I suppose I wouldn't." "Exactly." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its careful order. "Which is why we need to change the narrative. We need to convince Nikolai that you're not leverage, that you're not important enough to use against me." The words shouldn't have stung, but they did. I set my coffee down carefully. "How do you propose we do that?" "By making our relationship public, and then ending it publicly." He watched my reaction. "We stage a fight, something visible, something convincing. We make it clear that whatever was between us is over, that you mean nothing to me now. That way, Nikolai has no reason to target you." "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend, just so you can publicly discard me?" "I want to keep you alive." His voice was sharp. "Everything else is negotiable." I stood, needing to move, to put distance between us. I walked to the windows and looked out at the city below. All those people living normal lives where the greatest drama was traffic or deadlines or whether to order takeout. And what happens after this public breakup? Do I just go back to my apartment like nothing happened? No, you can't go back there. Not yet. I heard him stand, heard his footsteps approaching. He stopped beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "I'll set you up somewhere else, somewhere safe. New apartment, new identity if necessary. I'll make sure you're protected." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." I turned to face him, and was startled by how close he'd gotten. I could see the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the slight crookedness of his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, besides removing the threat?" Something flickered in his expression. "Peace of mind, knowing that my mistakes didn't cost an innocent person their life." "Is that all?" The question hung between us. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, growing louder then fading away. Massimo reached up as if to touch my face, then stopped himself, his hand dropping back to his side. "No," he said quietly. "That's not all." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something that made his jaw tighten, then typed a quick response. "Nikolai wants to meet," he said. "Tomorrow night. Neutral location. He's proposing a trade. His information about the people he's been working with in exchange for my assurance that you'll be unharmed." "Why would you need to assure him of that? You just said you were planning to stage a breakup." "Because he's accelerating his timeline. He knows I know about the betrayal, and he's trying to salvage what he can. Massimo pocketed his phone. Meeting with him is risky, but it might be our best chance to resolve this without further bloodshed. You mean it might be your best chance to kill him? He didn't deny it. Would that bother you? I considered the question honestly. I don't know. I should say yes. But when I think about what he wanted to do to you, what he might still do. I trailed off. I don't know what the right answer is anymore. There isn't a right answer. There's just survival. He moved past me to the window, his reflection sharp in the glass. My grandmother used to say that the world is full of hard choices, and pretending they're easy is a luxury only the naive can afford. What else did she teach you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He glanced at me, then back out at the city. She taught me chess, not just the moves, but the philosophy of it. That sometimes you have to sacrifice pieces to win the game. That the queen is powerful, but vulnerable. That the king is weak, but essential. Which piece are you? I've always thought of myself as the knight, moving in unexpected ways, jumping over obstacles. A slight smile touched his mouth. My father was the king. Everyone else was positioned to protect him. And your mother? The smile vanished. My mother was the queen who got sacrificed too early in the game. I waited, sensing there was more. She was killed when I was 16, Massimo said, his voice carefully neutral in the way that suggested old pain. Caught in crossfire during a dispute between my father's organization and a rival family. She was just coming home from buying groceries. Wrong place, wrong time. I'm so sorry. My father changed after that, became harder, more ruthless. He went after the people responsible with a thoroughness that frightened everyone, including me. Massimo's reflection in the glass looked haunted. He got his revenge, but it cost him everything else. His judgment, his principles, his humanity. By the time he died, he'd become exactly the kind of monster he'd always claimed to be fighting against. Is that why you go to the apartment on Chiswick Street? To remember who you were before you inherited all of this? He turned to face me fully. How do you do that? Do what? See through to the truth of things. Most people look at me and see only the surface, the power, the danger, the carefully constructed image. But you, he took a step closer. You saw someone who might need a friend, someone who might appreciate an umbrella on a rainy day. I saw someone lonely, I said softly. Like recognizes like. Are you lonely, Gemma? The question was barely above a whisper. I thought about my small apartment, my quiet job, my life built around routines that never involved other people. Yes, I think I have been for a very long time. Since your grandmother died? Since before that. Since I realized that everyone I loved eventually disappeared. I looked down at my hands. My parents in the accident, my grandmother to cancer, even the few friends I had in school. We all drifted apart after graduation. I learned that it was easier not to get close to people, easier to be alone than to risk losing someone else. So you pour your heart into flowers instead. Flowers are honest. They're beautiful for a season, and then they die, and everyone expects it. There's no false promise of permanence. I met his eyes, but they still deserve care while they're here. They still deserve to be appreciated. Massimo was quiet for a long moment. I think I understand why Nikolai assumed you mattered to me. You're the kind of person who tends to things others overlook, who finds beauty in temporary moments, who offers help without calculating the cost. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. You're everything I stopped believing existed in this world. His touch lingered, warm against my cheek. I should have stepped back, should have remembered that this was temporary, that we were going to stage a public breakup, that I was just a complication he needed to resolve. but I didn't move. "Massimo," I began, not sure what I was going to say. His phone buzzed again, breaking the moment. He pulled back, checking the screen, and his expression shifted to something harder. "Pavel has intel on Nikolai's current location. If we move now, we can end this before tomorrow night's meeting." "You mean kill him before he has a chance to defend himself?" "I mean eliminate a threat before he hurts anyone else." Massimo's voice had gone cold, professional. "He's already sold information that got 3 of my people arrested. He's planning to kill me and take over operations. He's threatened you. At what point does defense become justified?" I didn't have an answer. I wanted to say that there was always another way, that violence begat violence, that surely there had to be a solution that didn't involve death. But I thought about the predatory way Nikolai had looked at me in the flower shop, and I knew Massimo was right. Some threats couldn't be negotiated away. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Stay here. Stay safe. Let me handle this." "No." The word came out fiercer than I'd intended. "If we're doing this public relationship charade tomorrow, then I need to understand what I'm protecting you from. I need to see who Nikolai really is." Massimo studied me with an expression I couldn't read. "You want to come with me to a meeting that might end in violence? I want to understand what I've gotten myself into. All of it." For a moment I thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he nodded. "All right. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. No questions, no hesitation. Agreed?" "Agreed." "Then get some rest. We leave in 2 hours." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Gemma, what you're about to see, the person I become when I'm doing this work, that's not the man who listened to you sing on the stairs." "I know. Do you?" He looked back at me, and in his eyes I saw something like regret. Because once you see that side of me, you can't unsee it, and I need you to be certain that's what you want. I thought about the umbrella always returned with care, about the notes he'd kept, about the way he'd said, "You've been the only good thing in my days." "I'm certain," I said. He nodded once and left me standing by the window, watching my reflection in the glass as the afternoon light slowly faded into evening. The warehouse was in a part of the city I'd never been to, where streetlights had been broken so long ago that no one bothered to replace them anymore. We'd driven here in silence. Massimo at the wheel of a different car, sleek and black and somehow more menacing than the sedan from that morning. I sat in the passenger seat watching industrial buildings blur past in the darkness, trying to keep my breathing steady. "Last chance to change your mind," Massimo said as we pulled into an alley behind what looked like an abandoned shipping facility. "I'm not changing my mind." He cut the engine and turned to face me. In the shadows, his features were all sharp angles and darkness. "When we go in there, you stay behind me. You don't speak unless I tell you to. If something goes wrong, you run. There's an exit at the back of the building. Alexei showed you the route on the map." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. "Gemma." He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and solid. "I mean it. If shooting starts, if anything happens, you run. Don't wait for me. Don't look back. Just run." "What about you?" "I've been doing this since I was 18. I know how to survive." He squeezed my hand once, then released it. "But I can't focus on surviving if I'm worried about protecting you." "Then maybe I shouldn't have come." "Maybe." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "But you insisted. So now we both have to live with that choice." He got out of the car, and I followed. The air was cold and smelled like oil and rust. Alexei appeared from the shadows, materializing so silently I jumped. He gave Massimo a subtle nod, some kind of signal I didn't understand. "He's inside," Alexei said quietly. "2 men with him. Pavel's team has the perimeter secured." "Good." Massimo's hand went to the small of my back, guiding me forward. "Stay close." We entered through a side door, that led into a cavernous space filled with empty shipping containers and abandoned machinery. Dim work lights had been strung up, creating pools of illumination in the darkness. And there, in the center of the largest pool of light, stood Nikolai. He looked different than he had in the flower shop. Less predatory, more desperate. 2 men flanked him, both armed, both watching us with the kind of alertness that suggested training. Nikolai himself held nothing but a manila folder. "Sokolov," he greeted Massimo with a nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I'm here." Massimo's voice was flat, emotionless. "Let's get this over with." Nikolai's gaze slid to me, and I saw recognition flicker across his face. "So it's true. The little florist matters to you." "She's here as a witness," Massimo said. "Nothing more." "Is that so?" Nikolai smiled, and it was worse than his predatory look had been. "Then you won't mind if I ask her a few questions." "I mind very much." Massimo's hand tightened on my back. "You deal with me, or you don't deal at all." For a tense moment, I thought Nikolai would push. Then he shrugged and held up the folder. "Fine. Let's talk business. In here is everything. Names, dates, transactions. Everyone I've been working with. Everything I've told them. It's yours in exchange for safe passage out of the country, an assurance that you won't come after me." "And the girl?" Massimo asked. "The girl goes free. No harm comes to her. You have my word." "Your word." Massimo laughed, and it was the coldest sound I'd ever heard. "Your word means nothing to me, Nikolai. You've been selling information for months. You've been planning to kill me and take over operations. Your word died the moment you betrayed my father's memory." Something shifted in Nikolai's expression. "Your father was a butcher who pretended to be a businessman. He built this organization on fear and blood, and you've done nothing to change that. I'm offering you a way out, information that could protect what's left of the operation in exchange for letting me walk away. That's more mercy than your father would have shown." "You're right." Massimo's voice remained deadly calm. "My father would have killed you the moment he learned of your betrayal. No meeting, no negotiation, just a bullet and an unmarked grave." "But you're not your father, are you?" Nikolai took a step forward. "You're the one who goes to that sad little apartment to pretend you're still human. You're the one who keeps that shy neighbor's notes like they mean something. You're the one who's weak enough to bring her here tonight instead of handling this like a professional." The 2 men with Nikolai shifted slightly, and I realized they were positioning themselves for something. My heart started pounding harder. "Massimo," I whispered. "Something's wrong." "I know." He didn't take his eyes off Nikolai. "Alexei, move." Everything happened at once. Alexei grabbed me and pulled me backwards just as the lights went out. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness in strobe-like bursts. I hit the ground hard, Alexei's weight covering me, his hand pressed over my mouth to keep me from screaming. The shooting lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. When the lights came back on, emergency floods this time, harsh and white, I saw Nikolai on the ground. His 2 men were down as well, and Massimo stood over them with a gun in his hand, completely still. "Clear," Alexei said into what I now realized was a radio earpiece. He helped me to my feet, his hand surprisingly gentle. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, unable to form words. My ears were ringing from the gunfire. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. Massimo walked over to us, his expression unreadable. "Get her out of here. Take her back to the penthouse." "Massimo," I started. "Now, Alexei." He still wasn't looking at me. "I'll deal with the cleanup." Alexei took my arm and started leading me toward the exit. I looked back once and saw Massimo kneeling beside Nikolai's body, picking up the fallen manila folder. His movements were mechanical, practiced, like he'd done this 100 times before. Because he had, I realized. This was who he was when he worked. This was the man behind the careful quietness, the tired eyes, the loneliness that had called to my own. This was what I'd asked to see, and now I couldn't unsee it. The drive back to the penthouse passed in silence. Alexei didn't try to make conversation, for which I was grateful. I sat in the passenger seat watching the city lights blur past and trying to process what I'd witnessed. The violence had been so quick, so efficient. One moment Nikolai was alive and negotiating, the next he was gone. Had Massimo shot him? Or had it been one of Pavel's team? Did it matter? When we reached the penthouse, Alexei walked me up and waited while I unlocked the door with the key Massimo had given me. "He'll be home soon," Alexei said quietly. "He's just making sure everything is handled properly." "Properly?" I repeated numbly. "Miss Morozov." Alexei's voice was gentle. "I know this is difficult, but Nikolai would have killed you without hesitation if he'd gotten the chance. What happened tonight, it was necessary. I know, and I did know, intellectually, but knowing and accepting were different things." After Alexei left, I walked through the penthouse in a daze. I ended up in the kitchen, mechanically making tea that I didn't really want. My hands had finally stopped shaking, but something else had settled into my chest. A cold, heavy understanding of exactly what Massimo's world entailed. I was standing by the window with my untouched tea when I heard the door open. Massimo entered, and I noticed immediately that he'd changed clothes. Different shirt, different jacket. No sign of what had happened at the warehouse. "You're still up," he observed. I couldn't sleep. He moved into the kitchen, poured himself a drink, something amber from a crystal decanter, and downed it in one swallow. "You shouldn't have seen that. I should have insisted you stay here." "Would it have changed anything? What happened tonight?" "No, but you wouldn't have to carry it with you." I set down my tea and turned to face him fully. "Is he dead, Nikolai?" "Yes." "Did you kill him?" Massimo met my eyes without flinching. "Yes." The simple honesty of it hit harder than I'd expected. The folder he had, the information, was it real? Some of it, enough to be useful. He poured another drink but didn't swallow this one immediately. "Pavel is working through it now. We'll know by morning how much damage Nikolai actually did." "And then what? You hunt down everyone he was working with?" "If necessary." He took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. "This is what I do, Gemma. This is who I am. I eliminate threats to protect what's mine. Sometimes that means violence. Often it does." "I know." I wrapped my arms around myself. "I asked to see this side of you. I asked to understand. And now I do." He set his glass down and moved closer, stopping a few feet away. "And now that you understand, now that you've seen what I'm capable of, do you want me to arrange transport to a safe house? Somewhere you can wait this out away from me?" I should have said yes. I should have taken the escape he was offering. But I thought about the way he'd kept my notes, the way he'd protected me without asking for anything in return, the way he'd looked when he talked about his grandmother teaching him chess. "No," I said. "I don't want to leave." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, relief, something deeper I couldn't name. "Why not?" "Because you were right. You're not your father. You didn't enjoy what happened tonight. You did what you thought was necessary to protect your people, to protect me. There's a difference." "Is there?" He laughed without humor. "My father used to say the same thing, that every act of violence was necessary, that every death served a purpose. And then one day, I looked at him and realized he'd started to enjoy it, that the necessity had become an excuse." "But you don't enjoy it," I said with certainty. "I saw your face after. You looked empty, like you'd carved something out of yourself to make room for what you had to do." Massimo closed the remaining distance between us, and I could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. "You see too much. You keep too much hidden." He reached out slowly and touched my face, his palm warm against my cheek. I thought if I kept you at a distance, if I never responded to your notes, never spoke to you, you'd be safe from all of this. But you were kind anyway. You kept leaving umbrellas and watering that fern and singing those songs. And I was selfish enough to let you, because for those few moments when I heard you in the hallway, I could pretend I was still someone capable of receiving kindness without corrupting it. You haven't corrupted anything, I said softly. Haven't I? You witnessed a murder tonight because of me. I witnessed you protecting yourself and your people from someone who wanted to destroy you both. That's not the same thing. He studied my face like he was trying to memorize it. How are you this forgiving? I'm not forgiving. I searched for the right words. I'm just trying to understand the difference between the person you have to be and the person you are. And I think the person you are is someone who kept notes from a shy neighbor because they reminded you that kindness still exists in the world. Massimo's thumb traced my cheekbone, a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. I don't deserve your kindness, Gemma Morozov. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. For a moment, we stood there in the quiet of the penthouse, the city lights casting shadows across his face. Then he leaned down slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to my forehead. It wasn't a kiss, not really. It was something gentler, a benediction, a promise, a moment of connection that felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced before. When he pulled back, his dark eyes held mine. Tomorrow, we have to put on a show. We have to make it look like there's something between us worth destroying publicly. Can you do that? Yes. And afterward, when we stage the breakup and you're supposed to hate me. He stopped, jaw tightening. What? Nothing. He stepped back, breaking the contact. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. He left me standing in the kitchen, my forehead still warm from where his lips had touched. And I realized that the most dangerous thing about Massimo Sokolov wasn't his capacity for violence. It was his capacity to make me believe that underneath the darkness, there was a man worth saving. The restaurant Massimo chose for our public relationship debut was the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, a wine list longer than most novels. We arrived separately, a strategic choice designed to create the impression of a secret romance being revealed. I wore a dress Massimo had arranged to be delivered to the penthouse that morning. Midnight blue silk that fit perfectly despite him never asking my size. He knew, I realized as I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. Just like he'd known how I took my coffee. He'd been paying attention for months, cataloging details about my life while I sang on the stairs and watered the fern, both of us orbiting each other in careful silence. Now that silence was about to shatter in the most public way possible. I arrived first, gave Massimo's name to the maître d', and was escorted to a table positioned precisely where Massimo wanted it, visible from the entrance, visible from the street-facing windows, visible to the maximum number of people. As I sat, I noticed the other diners, mostly wealthy couples and business associates, the kind of people who moved in Massimo's actual world. Several looked at me with polite curiosity. A woman alone at one of the best tables, clearly waiting for someone important. Massimo arrived exactly 10 minutes later. I watched heads turn as he entered, watched the subtle ripple of recognition move through the room. People knew who he was, even if they pretended not to. He moved through the restaurant with that same quiet authority I'd first noticed in the stairwell, but here it seemed amplified, command rather than consideration. When he reached the table, he smiled at me. It was small and private, meant only for me, but I knew people were watching, knew this moment was being catalogued and would be discussed later. "You look beautiful," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Thank you." I'd practiced this, rehearsed what I would say and how I would act, nervous, but happy, like a woman at the beginning of something that mattered. He sat across from me, and a waiter appeared immediately with wine. Massimo ordered without consulting the menu, then turned his attention fully to me. "How are you feeling about all of this?" "Terrified," I admitted quietly. "Is anyone watching right now?" 3 tables, minimum, plus the staff. His expression remained warm, affectionate, even as he delivered information about our surveillance. "There's a photographer across the street, not one of mine. Someone tipped them off that I'd be here tonight." "Nikolai?" "Nikolai's dead." Something cold flickered in his eyes before warmth returned. "But he had allies. People who knew about you and decided the story was worth exploiting." The wine arrived, and Massimo raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice carrying to the tables around us. "To new beginnings," I echoed, and we drank. The meal that followed was surreal. On the surface, we were 2 people enjoying an intimate dinner. Massimo asking about my work at the flower shop, me asking about his businesses, both of us smiling and laughing at appropriate moments. But underneath ran a current of awareness that this was all performance, all strategy. "Tell me something real," I said quietly between courses. "Something that's not part of the script." Massimo leaned back in his chair, studying me. "What do you want to know?" "The songs I sing on the stairs, your grandmother's songs. Which was her favorite?" Something genuine softened his features. "There was one about a nightingale and a rose. She'd sing it while making tea, always at the same time in the afternoon. I can still hear her voice when I smell bergamot." "Solove e Rosa," I said, naming the song. "My grandmother sang that one too, usually when she was arranging white roses. Would you sing it for me, sometime when we're not performing?" The question caught me off guard. "If you want." "I do." He reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like an anchor. "There's a group from Nikolai's former associates 3 tables to your left. They're watching very carefully." I resisted the urge to look. What are they looking for? Confirmation that you matter, that removing you would hurt me. His thumb traced circles on my palm. "After tonight, everyone will believe we're involved. Tomorrow, we end it in a way that makes them believe it meant nothing." "How?" "I'm still working on the details, but it needs to be public and brutal. You need to look devastated. I need to look indifferent." The thought of manufacturing that kind of pain, even as performance, made my chest tight. "And then?" "And then you disappear. New identity, new city if necessary. Somewhere they can't find you. What about you?" "I deal with the fallout. Make it clear that anyone who even thinks about using you against me will suffer the consequences." His hand tightened on mine. "But first we have to sell this. We have to make them believe." For the rest of the meal, we played our parts perfectly. Massimo was attentive without being possessive, warm without being inappropriate. I responded with shy pleasure, the kind a woman might feel being noticed by someone powerful. When dessert arrived, something elaborate with gold leaf that I didn't taste, he fed me a bite across the table, an intimate gesture that made the photographer across the street visible through the window raise their camera. "That'll be in the tabloids by morning," Massimo observed. "Mysterious man spotted dining with unknown woman at exclusive restaurant." "Do they know who you are, really?" "Some do, others suspect. The ones who matter, Nikolai's former associates, they'll know exactly who I am and what it means that I'm here with you publicly." He set down his fork. "There's something else you should know. The information in Nikolai's folder. It included details about his replacement plan, who he was working with, who was supposed to take over various operations after I was eliminated. And one of them is here tonight, 4 tables behind you. He's been watching us for the past 40 minutes. My heart rate spiked. What's he going to do? Nothing here. Too public. But he's confirming what Nikolai believed, that you're my weakness. Tomorrow, when we stage the breakup, he'll see that belief was false, that you were nothing but a passing interest. Massimo's voice dropped even lower. The hard part is going to be making you look genuinely hurt. I need you to draw on real emotion. What kind of emotion? Fear, humiliation, heartbreak. His dark eyes held mine. Whatever you'd feel if I actually betrayed you. If I revealed that everything between us was manipulation. I thought about the notes he'd kept, the umbrella returned with care, the way he'd said I was the only good thing in his days. That would hurt, I admitted. I know, and I'm sorry. He signaled for the check. But it's the only way to keep you safe. We left the restaurant hand in hand, the photographer getting clear shots of us exiting together. Massimo's car was waiting, but before we got in, he pulled me close and kissed my temple, a gesture that looked affectionate but allowed him to whisper in my ear, "They're following us. 3 cars. When we get back to the penthouse, we're going to have an argument. Loud enough for the surveillance they've no doubt planted to pick up. And tomorrow morning, we're going to have a very public confrontation in a very public place." Where? The flower shop. Tatiana's agreed to participate. She'll be there as a witness to make it believable. I pulled back to look at him. You contacted Tatiana? I had to explain why you'd be unavailable for work. She was protective, but she understands what's at stake. We got into the car, and Massimo immediately raised the privacy screen between us and the driver. She cares about you, she wants you safe. So you told her the truth? Enough of it. He settled back against the seat, maintaining the careful distance he'd kept all evening. She knows you're in danger because of your association with me. She knows we're staging a breakup to protect you. She doesn't know about Nikolai, or what happened at the warehouse. What did you tell her about us? About what we are to each other? Massimo was quiet for a moment. I told her you'd shown me kindness when I needed it most, that I'd failed to protect you from the consequences of that kindness, that I was trying to fix my mistake. Is that what I am? A mistake? No. The word was immediate and certain. You're the least mistake thing in my life right now. We arrived at the penthouse to find it exactly as we'd left it. But the moment we entered, Massimo's entire demeanor shifted. His voice rose, sharp and cold. I don't understand why this is so complicated. I've explained the situation clearly. I stared at him, confused, until I saw him tap his ear and point to several locations around the room. Listening devices. Someone had planted them while we were gone. Understanding flooded through me. The argument was starting now. Complicated? I let my voice rise to match his. You call turning my entire life upside down uncomplicated? I gave you choices. I've been nothing but accommodating. Accommodating? You've been controlling. You decided where I'd stay, what I'd wear, who I could talk to, for your safety, for your convenience. I let real frustration bleed into my voice. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with all of this. I didn't ask to be pulled into your world, and I certainly didn't ask to be treated like some possession you can manage. Massimo's eyes met mine, and I saw approval there even as his voice remained harsh. Then leave. No one's keeping you here. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll go straight to the people you're so afraid of and tell them everything. You wouldn't dare. He moved closer, and there was something almost desperate in his expression that I didn't understand. Gemma, don't what? Don't call your bluff? Don't point out that for all your power and control, you're just a man who's terrified of being alone? I grabbed my purse from where I'd left it. I'm going to my own apartment. Don't follow me. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but I kept walking to the elevator, kept moving until I was in the car Alexei had waiting, per the plan. and we were pulling away from the building. Only then did I let myself breathe. "You did well," Alexei said from the driver's seat. Very convincing. It didn't feel like acting. And it hadn't. Some of that anger, that frustration, it had been real. Being pulled into Massimo's world had turned my life upside down. Even if I understood why, even if I'd chosen to stay, there was a part of me that resented the loss of control. Alexei drove me to a hotel, different from the penthouse, carefully chosen for its security and anonymity. "Massimo will be here in a few hours," he explained as we rode the elevator to my floor. "After he's confirmed that the surveillance picked up your argument. And tomorrow you show up at the flower shop at opening time. Massimo will arrive 30 minutes later. You'll have the final confrontation there, in front of Tatiana and any customers. Make it devastating. Make it clear you want nothing to do with him. And then you're free." Alexei stopped outside the hotel room door. New identity, new city, new life. Everything arranged. All you have to do is walk away. After he left, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and tried to imagine it. Walking away from Massimo, from the man who'd kept my notes and returned my umbrella and looked at me like I was something precious. Walking away from the connection we'd built in stolen moments and dangerous circumstances. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for tonight, for all of it. Sleep well." I knew it was from Massimo, using a burner phone. I typed back, "You too." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I meant what I said, about you being the only good thing. That wasn't part of the performance." My throat tightened. "I know. After tomorrow, you'll be safe. That's what matters." I stared at the screen, at those words that were simultaneously a promise and a goodbye. Then I typed the truth. "What if I don't want to be safe if it means losing you?" The 3 dots appeared and stayed for a long time. Finally, "Then we're both in trouble, because I don't want to let you go either." I fell asleep with the phone in my hand, those words the last thing I saw before my eyes closed. The flower shop looked exactly as I'd left it, except Tatiana had prepared it like a stage set. The morning's delivery of roses was arranged in the front window, pink and white blooms catching the early light. She'd positioned the work table where I usually stood so it was visible from the street. Every element designed for maximum visibility, maximum impact. I arrived at 7, an hour before opening. Tatiana was waiting, her steel-gray hair pulled back severely, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "You look terrible," she observed, pulling me into a brief, fierce hug. "No sleep?" "Some." I set down my purse and looked around the shop that had been my sanctuary for 3 years. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's asking a lot." "Is nothing." She waved off my gratitude. "This man, he wants to keep you safe. That is good enough for me." She paused. "But Gemma, after today, where will you go?" "Somewhere new. Somewhere he's arranging." "Alone?" The question hung between us. I didn't have an answer. At 7:30, the first customer arrived, except I recognized him from the restaurant, one of Massimo's people positioned to witness and report. At 7:45, 2 women came in looking for arrangements for a funeral. Genuine customers, Tatiana confirmed, but conveniently timed. At 8, Massimo arrived. I saw him through the window first, his black coat stark against the morning gray. He paused outside, and our eyes met through the glass. Even from that distance, I could see the exhaustion in his face, the same sleeplessness that had marked my night. Then he entered, and the performance began. "Gemma." His voice was cold, nothing like the warmth from dinner. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." I kept my hands busy arranging roses, though they trembled. I told you last night. I'm done. You're being unreasonable. I'm being realistic. I set down the scissors before I cut myself. You want to control everything. Where I live, what I do, who I speak to. That's not protection, Massimo. That's possession. The two genuine customers had stopped pretending to browse, watching our confrontation with poorly concealed interest. Tatiana stood behind the counter, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Everything I've done has been to keep you safe, Massimo said, and there was real frustration in his voice now. You don't understand the danger. I understand perfectly. I moved out from behind the work table, needing the space, the distance. I understand that you live in a world where people get hurt, where kindness is a weapon and connection is leverage. But that's your world, not mine. I'm not part of it, not. You became part of it the moment you left that first note on my door. Then I'm unbecoming part of it. I grabbed my coat from where it hung by the back room. I shouldn't have gotten involved. I shouldn't have what? He moved closer, and I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like panic. Shouldn't have been kind? Shouldn't have reminded me that good people still exist? You don't get to do this, I said, my voice breaking in a way that wasn't entirely performance. You don't get to make me matter to you, and then expect me to just disappear when it becomes inconvenient. Inconvenient? The word came out like a crack. This isn't about convenience. This is about keeping you alive. By erasing me from your life, by sending me away to some new city with a new name where I can't. I stopped, because suddenly this felt too real, the emotions bleeding past the boundaries of performance. Where I can't be the person who watered your fern and left you umbrellas. Something shifted in Massimo's expression. The mask he wore so carefully began to crack. Gemma. No. I held up a hand. You want this to end? Fine. It's ended. Go back to your apartment on Chiswick Street. Go back to being alone. I'm sure you'll find someone else to observe through windows and keep notes from. The customers were watching with rapt attention. Tatiana's eyes had gone wide, and I saw in Massimo's face the exact moment when he broke from the script entirely. I don't want someone else, he said, his voice low and fierce. I want you. The woman who sings old songs while climbing stairs. The woman who cares for plants that aren't hers because all living things deserve attention. The woman who looked at me, at what I really am, and didn't run. Massimo, what are you doing? I whispered, because this wasn't the plan. This was supposed to end with indifference, with me walking away and him letting me go. I'm failing to let you go. He closed the remaining distance between us. I'm choosing wrong and I know it. I'm putting you in danger and I know that too. But I can't. He stopped, jaw clenched. I can't go back to that apartment and pretend your notes don't matter. I can't go back to being alone after knowing what it's like to have you in my life. This was supposed to be fake, I said. The relationship, the breakup, all of it. I know. His hand came up to cut my face, the gesture achingly gentle. But somewhere between the notes and the fern and watching you exist in the world with such careful kindness, it stopped being fake for me. One of the customers gasped softly. Tatiana's expression had transformed into something between shock and satisfaction. And I stood there, feeling the entire plan unravel around us. What about the people watching? I asked. The ones who think I'm your weakness? Let them think it. His dark eyes held mine with absolute certainty. Let them know that you're not a weakness. You're a choice. My choice. And anyone who touches you will learn exactly what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine. That's not how this was supposed to go. No. It was supposed to end with you safe and me alone and both of us pretending the past weeks meant nothing. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. But I'm done pretending. I'm done being alone. And I'm done letting fear dictate how I live. The door chimed as someone else entered. Alexei, I realized, with several other men I recognized from Massimo's security team. They positioned themselves at the windows, the entrance, creating a perimeter. "Boss," Alexei said quietly. "This isn't—" "I know what it isn't." Massimo didn't take his eyes off me. "I'm changing the plan." "To what?" "To the truth." He lowered his hand from my face but didn't step back. "To making it clear that Gemma Morozov matters to me, that threatening her is threatening me, that anyone who has a problem with that can come directly to me to discuss it." "You're making yourself vulnerable," I said. "I've been vulnerable since the first note you slipped under my door. I just didn't want to admit it." He looked at Tatiana. "I'm sorry for the disruption to your business." "Is no disruption." Tatiana's eyes were bright. "Is the most entertainment I've had in years. But you," she pointed at Massimo, "you hurt this girl. You answer to me. Understand?" "Understood." He turned back to me. "I know this is asking too much. I know you deserve better than a life lived in shadows with a man who's made more enemies than friends. But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Not because you're afraid or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to." The shop had gone completely silent. The customers, Tatiana, even the security team, everyone waited for my answer. I thought about 5 months of silence, of notes left without responses, of small kindnesses exchanged through umbrella returns and careful songs. I thought about how lonely I'd been before Massimo became part of my routine, even from a distance. And I thought about the past few days, the fear, the violence, the impossible circumstances that had forced us together. But I also thought about the way he'd kept my notes, the way he'd protected me without asking for anything, the way he'd looked when he said I was the only good thing in his days. "If I stay," I said slowly, "I need to know that I'm staying as myself. Not as someone you're protecting or managing or hiding away. I need to still water the fern and sing on the stairs and work with flowers. I wouldn't want you any other way. And I need to know that when people threaten me because of you, you'll teach me how to defend myself instead of just defending me." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "Done." "And I need you to answer my notes. Actually answer them this time. I promise." He pulled the stack of cream cardstock from his pocket, the same notes I'd been writing for 5 months. "I'll even respond to these if you want. In order." "What would you say?" I asked, curious despite everything. He looked at the first one, the very first note I'd ever left. "Dear Gemma from 4C, I do need something. I need you to keep singing on the stairs. I need you to keep leaving umbrellas on rainy days. I need you to keep being exactly who you are, because you remind me that kindness still exists." My breath caught. "And the second one?" "Thank you for watering the fern. It's the first living thing I've cared for in years. Watching it grow reminds me that not everything withers under my attention." He went through them one by one, giving me the responses he'd crafted in his head over 5 months of silence. By the time he reached the last note, the one I'd left 3 weeks ago that simply said, "Happy Friday," I was fighting tears. "Happy Friday," he read, "and every Friday after, if you'll let me share them with you." "That's a terrible line," I said, voice thick. "I know, I'm better at violence than romance." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, "But I'm willing to learn." I looked at Tatiana, who was openly crying now, at the customers, who looked like they'd stumbled into the climax of a movie, at Alexei and the security team maintaining their perimeter, and I looked at Massimo, this complicated, dangerous, impossibly gentle man who'd somehow become essential to my life in the span of 5 months of silence and 3 days of chaos. "All right," I said. "I'll stay." The relief that washed over his face was worth every risk, every danger, every complicated choice that had led us here. He pulled me close, pressing his forehead to mine in a gesture that was somehow more intimate than any kiss. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing this, For choosing me. Just answer my notes from now on, I whispered back. Every single one. Later, after we'd left the flower shop with Massimo's security team maintaining their careful perimeter, after Tatiana had hugged me hard and whispered, "Be happy, little one," after we'd returned to the apartment on Chiswick Street instead of the penthouse, I found Massimo in the hallway. He was watering the fern. I watched from the doorway of 4C, my door open, his door open, the space between them no longer feeling like a separation but like the beginning of something new. "It's grown," I observed. "You've taken good care of it." He set down the watering can and turned to face me. "I never thanked you for that. You thanked me by returning my umbrella, by keeping my notes, by choosing to let me in even when it went against every strategic instinct you have. Strategic instincts are overrated." He moved closer, crossing the threshold into my tiny apartment. It was the first time he'd ever entered it, and I saw him take it in. The second-hand furniture, the pressed flowers in frames, the stack of books by the bed. "It's not much," I said. "It's you." He picked up one of the framed flowers, a white peony. "From your first arrangement? How did you know?" "Because you're sentimental in ways you pretend not to be. Because you keep small, beautiful things close. Because you understand that the temporary can matter just as much as the permanent." I took the frame from him and set it back on its shelf. "What happens now? You said yourself that choosing me publicly makes me a target." "It does. Which is why you're going to learn self-defense from Alexei. Why you're going to understand exactly what you're walking into. And why—" He pulled a small box from his pocket. "You're going to have this." I opened it to find a key. Not to apartment 4B, but to the penthouse. "I'm not asking you to live there," Massimo said quickly. "I'm asking you to know you have a safe place whenever you need it. That you're not alone in this." "And you?" I asked. "What do you get?" "The privilege of answering your notes, the privilege of hearing you sing on the stairs, the privilege of watching you water our fern, and knowing that you chose to stay when you could have run." I reached up and touched his face, feeling the stubble along his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "I've been alone for a long time. So have you. Maybe we can be alone together." "I'd like that." He turned his head to press a kiss to my palm. "Though I should warn you, I'm not good at this. At relationships, at vulnerability, at any of it. Neither am I. We'll learn together." As the late afternoon sun slanted through my window, painting everything in shades of gold, Massimo pulled me close. And there in the doorway between our apartments, between his shadows and my light, between who we'd been alone and who we might become together, we stood holding each other like anchors against the storm. The fern in the hallway window continued growing, its fronds unfurling toward the light. And every time I watered it, every time we watered it together, I was reminded that even the smallest acts of care could transform spaces that seemed impossible to fill. So, what did you think? Leave a like if you enjoyed it and comment. Would you have made the same choice as her? Share with someone who loves these stories.